happens right now is that the finance minister gets the blame or the prime minister gets the blame for raising taxes, but the chief ministers just go and give money. So in Punjab, they are doing these show projects like air ambulances, which have no need. Sindh, I don't know what happens to the money, but Sindh also gets a lot of money, but it's certainly not spent in Karachi, and it's not even spent anywhere else that we can tell. Allah only knows where the money goes. In Balochistan, the corruption is something that the people in Sindh can only dream about. The last 3,000 schools built in Balochistan, 2,700 schools were ghost schools. So the money just went away. So that's like 90% of money going to the waste. So NFC award has to change.
Welcome to yet another episode of All Things Money. Today we've got a very special guest. That's the former finance minister, Miftah Ismail. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
And what do you think about what's happening in the country in terms of the economy?
The country's economy has not been very good for the last few years, and it is getting increasingly tougher for middle classes and poor people to survive in Pakistan. I think thriving is out of the question now. Since, let's say, from the beginning of this century, certainly since the restoration of democracy, Pakistan has been going behind the rest of the world in terms of per capita growth, in terms of a lot of other human development statistics, whether it's education, whether it's life expectancy, whether it's health, etc. And that's happening since at least 2007, when the last year of Musharraf, if not longer. In the last 3 years, we've not just gone behind the rest of the world, or not gone behind relative to the rest of the world, we've gone behind relative to ourselves, so that we've become poorer every year in the last 3 years. And per capita income has declined. A person making 100,000 rupees 3 years ago has lost about 40% of his per capita of his consumption rupee, or his living standard. So Pakistan has had difficulties, economic difficulties. Pakistanis have had economic difficulties. Things are more stable now, primarily because the international oil prices have come down. They were, let's say, $100 3 years ago. Today they are 75, again because of the Iran-Israel conflict. But they went down as low as 60. But as long as the oil prices are not much beyond 80 or less than 80, Pakistan will be economically stable. Macroeconomic stability will be here. But the purchasing power of Pakistanis is continuously getting eroded. And as long as that happens, obviously, we can't say that the economy is doing well.
So you literally read my mind. That's what I was supposed to say. Real incomes are down by maybe 50% in the last 4 years, largely because of compound inflation of almost 100% since 2021, which was mainly due to PKR depreciation. So incomes have gone down in real terms. How? Now, so we know what the history is. Let's just talk about the future. How do we get to a point, or how do we get growth now?
So we know what the history is, but let me just plug in an article by Nadeemul Haq in Business Recorder a few days back. They talked about 5 or 6 foreign currency depreciation episodes since 1973. Pakistan has a habit, Pakistani policymakers have a habit of keeping the rupee-dollar parity at some number.
Some arbitrary number.
Some arbitrary number for a few years. Those few years, especially in the last couple of years of that episode, look really good because imports increase, growth comes, things become cheaper, import becomes cheaper, and then all of a sudden we run out of money, we run out of foreign currency, then we have to devalue by 50, 60%, and then we are back on the same track. So that's one problem with Pakistan. The other problem in Pakistan is that we have a very large budget deficit and a growing budget deficit. Secularly growing budget deficit and an increasing trend. Some years we can shave off a little bit, some years it goes up a little bit more, but we have a secular budget deficit that keeps growing. And in order to finance that deficit, we have to increase our taxes. So that today the Pakistani marginal income tax rate is the highest, one of the highest in the world, certainly higher than any third world country, developing country. And because the government has such a large deficit, it does not have the money to pay for power and gas deficit, so the power prices and gas prices are also one of the highest in the world, certainly the highest in the developing countries. And so unless and until we are able to address that budget deficit, which is caused because of some structures in our budget, the NFC award, the not taxing agriculture income, not taxing trade, businesses and all that, lots of other things. So because we primarily only tax manufacturing and industry, which is about 25% of the economy, and don't tax the other 75% of the economy, because of that, our tax base is smaller. Within that base, we tax at a very high rate. We have a very large budget deficit. In order to finance that budget deficit, absent your reserves, you have to increase your current account deficit. The current account deficit, once it increases because you have no reserves, the foreigners are not particularly happy about financing that deficit. And so they stop financing your deficit and you have to devalue the currency, your growth comes down. So we are in that vicious cycle and we have not broken that cycle.
So yes, we are in that cycle and you hit the nail on the head. It's a budget deficit problem more than anything else. Budget deficit simply being your expenditures are greater than your revenue. So much greater than your revenue. So let's just focus on the budget deficit right now because that's like the mother of all problems. How do we fix that?
I mean, there is no way you can fix the budget deficit without first changing the NFC.
I think let's just explain what NFC is for
NFC
everyone.
award is a National Finance Commission award, which is how the money is, federal taxations is distributed between provinces and the federal government. The current NFC award, which came in 2010, and it's only for 5 years, so it expired in 2015, but we've continued with it for the last 10 years. It says that 57.5% of all federal government taxes, that all taxes you pay on sales tax every time you buy a shampoo, all taxes you pay on income tax, etc., 57.5% of that will go to the 4 provinces. Okay. In addition, another percentage, 1% of monies goes to KP for war on terror. 0.6% of the divisible pool goes to Sindh for giving up Octroi back in 1992. And then the federal government also has to finance AJK. It has to finance GB. And it also finances the FATA portion of the KP government. Okay. So about 60%, actually more than 60, but less than 60% of the federal government revenue goes to the provinces. So this year, for instance, this coming year, the federal government is saying that we are going to collect 14,130 billion rupees. Of this, about 8,400 billion rupees will go to the provinces. And of that, half will go to Punjab, a quarter will goes to the Sindh, 15% goes to KP, and 10% goes to Balochistan, approximately. So that 60% money that goes away from the provinces means that federal government is left with very little money. Now, the provinces have so much money that they actually run surpluses. And this year, for instance, KP and Punjab and Sindh together had $1,000 billion rupees in their bank accounts, right? Now coming back, the federal government had a budget deficit of 8,500 billion, I think. Yeah, 8,000 billion rupees. So whereas federal government has a budget deficit of 8,000 billion rupees, the provincial governments had a combined surplus of 1,000 billion rupees. Now suppose that you want to plug that deficit, the federal deficit of 8,000 billion. You don't need to raise 8,000 billion more in taxes. You now need to raise about 20,000 billion more in taxes, because 60% money goes to the provinces and only 40% remains with the federal government. So you need another 20,000 billion rupees to plug that deficit, to finance that deficit. That's just not possible. That you cannot increase the federal taxes by 200-300%. And that is where the economy is killed, which is where, I mean, it is because of the NFC award that you have to charge, salaried employees 38.5% tax. It is because of these NFC awards that you have to charge businesses 61% tax. So you have to reduce their taxes because a lot of this money is also wasted. And the fiscal federalism teaches us that where you give authority to spend money, you should also make them responsible to raising the money. So the provincial chief minister should also raise their own taxes. What happens right now is that the finance minister gets the blame, or the prime minister gets the blame for raising taxes, but the chief ministers just go and give money. So in Punjab, they are doing these show projects like air ambulances, which have no need. Sindh, I don't know what happens to the money, but Sindh also gets a lot of money, but it's certainly not spent in Karachi, and it's not even spent anywhere else that we can tell. Allah only knows where the money goes. In Balochistan, the corruption is something that the people in Sindh can only dream about. The last 3,000 schools built in Balochistan, 2,700 schools were ghost schools, so the money just went away. So that's like 90% of money going to the waste. So NFC award has to change. But not just that, you need to also bring agriculture into a federal income tax net. And the reason is that, now you also hear that a lot of industrialists have dairy farms, and they will show profits in dairy farms and not in their textile mills, to not pay taxes. If you give people this break that as long as you have agricultural income, you have no tax, which means that there is no way you can always, there is no way you can track undocumented income, documented income, black income, white income. So you need to bring that into the federal tax net. There is nothing sacrosanct or sacred about agriculture income. If you are going to tax an urban peon making 50,000 rupees or more, and if you're going to bring him into the tax net, surely you should ask people who own thousands of acres of agricultural land to pay their fair share of taxes. That's the other thing you need to do. You need to, these are structural issues. You need to also tax property properly. And that would happen either if you cut down provincial money, or if you give federal government the authority to tax property. So you have billions of dollars, billions of rupees of houses in Karachi, Lahore, other places who pay little or no property tax. That's not fair. So these are the structural things you need to fix. Then there are political things you need to fix. There is no reason why you should not tax shopkeepers. Last year the scheme, Tajir Dost scheme came, and it really became Tajir Dost because in the end, we started with a 52 billion rupee target, and we ended up with 40 lakh rupees. So that's a little short of.
It never worked out. Yeah.
The target.
So you talk about NFC. Let's say you have an option, we have a clean slate. How do you redesign the NFC? What would you do differently?
First of all, I would give all taxes, the property taxes and this to the federal government. Okay.
But you're just saying if you're spending, you should be generating revenue as well. So if you're giving the taxes back to the federal government, that doesn't make sense.
I will give all taxes to the federal government, first of all. And I will say that this is what the federal government can collect, including from your provinces. Okay. We will do the collection, like we already do for Balochistan, sales tax and all that, because the provinces don't have the machinery to collect proper taxes. But if the province wants to take a tax, they can take this tax. The property tax should actually be at the division and district levels. Okay. They should fund most of the districts and divisions. The federal government should be helping poorer districts like Avaran and Charsadda, and not richer districts like Karachi and Lahore. But it's their choice whether they wish to tax it themselves or leave it with the federal government, just the property tax. Okay. The income, there should be no distinction between agricultural income and income from any other source. Income tax all has to be with the federal government. With the sales tax, right now you have services with the provincial governments and goods with the federal government. That's fine. Custom has to be only with the federal government. No province should have the right to tax any imports or export business. But the province should have the option of giving this tax to the federal government and ask them to collect on their behalf.
No, so how do we decide something should stay with the province or something should stay with the federal?
Okay, normally, I mean, there are historical reasons. Property taxes, because property is a local asset, and you have local, you create local load. For instance, if I have a house in Karachi, then I use the sewage line in Karachi, I use the water line in Karachi, I use the roads in Karachi. So then I should pay some tax to Karachi, right?
Yeah.
Or to the locality where I live, whether I live in North Nazabad or whether I live in Mahmoodabad, wherever I live, or Doraji colony, I should pay that tax. So that happens. In America, for instance, income taxes, both the provinces and which they call states and the federation also both have the right to tax. So you can also have both of these entities tax the same income. Provinces normally do, or states do 1 or 2%. Federation obviously does it at a higher rate. But first, I will say everything is in the mix to the federal government. Whatever the federal government wants, the federal government, after negotiation. But because of all the historical reasons, right now what I would do is I would do those two things. I would bring agriculture income tax into the Federation Act. I would give property tax to localities, divisions, okay? And the second, I would say that whatever the provinces were getting right now, up to now they get, beyond anything, beyond what happened last year, whatever the federal government gets, collects tax, 80% goes to the federal government until the budget deficit is fixed, okay? Or 90% goes to the federal government and then you ask the federal, and then you change the formula for NFC and you say the more tax you collect, the more money we will give you, okay? And the rate of change of population should not be part of the formula. So there are things that you can do. I mean, there are many complicated things that I would do, but I would change these things.
So essentially,
but the essential part is that responsibility of taxes should be on those who spend the money.
all right. So essentially, what you're saying is going forward, if I heard you right, going forward, we can just like lock whatever provinces were given, let's say in whatever fiscal year, and then any additional requirement they can generate through their own resources.
Federal government should get 80 to 90% of what it collects. It should share 10% of it, and the provinces can certainly afford for their additional requirements, from property taxes they can get.
And this will also affect their development budgets as well,
I
as the recurring.
I want that budget to be reduced. I want federal development budget to be reduced, and I want provincial development budgets to be reduced. We are spending 3,800 billion rupees this year on federal and provincial development.
Are we spending or are we just planning?
No, we plan, but we spend. I mean, the federation is not able to go beyond 800 billion, but we allocate that money, and that money is not spent in Pakistan. It's diverted. It goes to foreign countries. I would say that 30%, 40% of that is corruption. So if 40% of 4,000 billion is corruption, that's 1,600 billion rupees of corruption. That's $5.5 billion of corruption.
So I was looking at it, there are roughly 3.2 trillion rupee worth of projects in the PSDP. And obviously allocation was around 1.1 trillion, but there are some allocation even as low as 50 million or 100 million to different projects. So nothing is going to happen. That project is not going to take off, but there will be a recurring flow and the overall cost.
You're just paying contractors, just to make them happy. And you also have a very huge throw forward.
Yes, throw forward.
And they still are coming up with new projects when you have such throw forward. One of the things they should do is to stop any new project until the throw forward is reduced, let's say, from 14 trillion or whatever number it is. But I mean, seriously, there is no reason why the federal government should be doing small projects, of small sewage lines in small UC, union councils and all that stuff. And certainly when you are so tight with money that you have to take 40% of people's salary, even if people are making 3-4 lakh rupees, if you have to tax doctors and civil engineers doctors and architects and all that, business individuals at 49%, if you have to tax companies at 61%, if you're so short of money, then you should not be throwing money away, on M&A or MPA projects where they can steal money.
All right, so that should end as well, because as you said, this needs to be at a provincial level.
Yes, I mean, it should go to the provincial level. Two, when it comes to provinces financing their own thing, they'll stop doing these things. And if they want to raise taxes, fine. Let them also look bad in people's eyes. And again, the federal government should be building large dams, water reservoirs, things like that. I understand that, okay. And there too, I think they should try to do as much private sector financing as possible. If there are large motorways outside of Punjab that they want to build, the federal government should build. No more motorways should be built in Punjab until some basic motorways are built in Sindh and other places in Balochistan. Other than that, the federal government should stay out of it.
But do we even need more motorways other than, let's say, connecting the Sakhar Multan?
We need Karachi, Hyderabad, and Hyderabad, Sakhar.
Other than Hyderabad, Sakhar, do we need anything else?
Karachi, Hyderabad. What they call motorway is not really a motorway.
No motorways, worse than Shah Faisal.
Yeah, lots of things are worse than Shah Faisal in Sindh. But Karachi, Hyderabad used to be a super highway built by Ayub Khan. So they just named it a motorway. By naming something a motorway doesn't make it a motorway. There's something called 34 mil ki chadai, which is a 34-mile marker, where the trucks go to like 3, 5, 10 miles per hour because of how the slope is.
How the slope is, yeah.
The road is so broken and all that stuff. I mean, that's not a motorway by any standard. Motorway is what is built between Sakhar and Multan.
Yeah.
Now, that's what I call a
But it's barely utilized.
Yes.
So that's the thing. You get a lot of these pet projects, a lot of expensive pet projects, which continue to cost an arm and a leg, and you got a lot of cost overruns associated with that as well. But they're barely utilized.
Well, I mean,
how do we tackle this problem?
It's not the overruns. It's the idea of the federal government doing projects for political benefits. They should not be doing this. We've seen that when you're funding power projects from PSDP, you do because you're not paying for it. The publics are paying for it. You get political benefit, you just do it. Solar, the best example is Qaid-e-Azam Solar that Mian Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif Saab built. At the time when he knew that A, solar was more expensive than all other power sources, B, the solar prices were coming down, he really should have waited. But he didn't wait. So they did a solar, and today they're buying that power for, I think, 30-some rupees. And yet you and people like you are having difficulty paying consumers half that money. But some of us do advocate for the consumers of Pakistan.
All right, so essentially what we're saying is there's a lot of room to cut in overall federal projects as well as provincial, and federal should prioritize what's more important rather than start doing stuff at the district level. And that's fair. So let's just come back to the current year's budget. What do you think it lacked, or what can really improve there?
Let me just finish that it's not just that the PSDP can be cut. There are other things in the federal government budget, current expenditures that can be cut, also in the provincial budget. And we should not be cutting education and health, but there are other things we can cut in the provincial budget as well as the federal budget. That said, that cuts should be accompanied with equivalent tax cuts. Okay. So now we come to the budget. What is good or bad about the budget? The budget lacks imagination. It's an ordinary budget, and it is not appropriate for the times. What do I mean by that? The last 3 years have been very, very tough on Pakistani consumers. You have written and noticed about how the Pakistani consumer has lost purchasing power. A guy making 100,000 rupees 3 years ago is probably equivalent to making 60,000 rupees. Even if he got a 20% increment in the last 3 years, his purchasing power is down by 30%. So when you talk about Pakistan conquering inflation, when you talk about Pakistan having macroeconomic stability, how has this stability come? The stability has not come because the government is sacrificed. The government increases every year. The stability has come because Pakistanis have paid taxes through their nose.
Real wages have gone down.
Pakistanis have paid taxes through their nose. Pakistanis have paid electricity and gas bills through their nose. Pakistani companies have paid interest at 22%. So many companies went under, so many companies stopped growing, so many companies are under deep stress even today, and many are bankrupt, or technically bankrupt. So this macroeconomic stability, yes, it came because of decrease in oil prices. Yes, it came because of decrease in commodity prices, but it also came because a lot of Pakistanis sacrificed a lot. The government did not partake in that sacrifice, just the ordinary Pakistanis sacrificed. So today then, there is macroeconomic stability. Oil prices are low. There is the IMF, and then there is the establishment in Pakistan, which is completely behind this government. The stars are all aligned. PTI really is not playing an effective role as an opposition party in parliament. Okay. Not all blame goes to PTI because they're under more stress than any civilian political party has come in Pakistan in a long, long time. Okay, this is the new normal for political victimization. So when PTI is under so much stress, government has such an open hand. Why did the government miss this opportunity? Not recognize the dysfunctionality of governance in Pakistan, not recognize that 8 out of 10 Pakistani children are not able to read 2 sentences in any language at the age of 10. That 40% of Pakistani children, 27 million Pakistani children are out of school. They have done nothing about this. They've done nothing about population. They've done nothing about the fact that Pakistan is 148 out of 148 in gender parity.
But then all of this actually is a provincial matter.
Yes.
That's where we come now.
Well, yes and no, because this is an emergency, right? Who controls provincial governments? Muslim League controls Punjab, which is PDM, part of PDM government in the Federation. People's Party controls Sindh, not now, for the last 18 years, and it has the worst record of any government, and it is part of the federal government. Balochistan is controlled by BAP or whichever party it is. It is also part of the federal government. It is the federal government. So, 3 of the 4 provinces are part of this. Where do you see this emergency? Where do you see the fact that for 3 years our GDP has not grown by more than 2.4% or whatever? The solution is not to come up with fake numbers about GDP. The solution is to do something about it. And what was to be done? Bring down the tax rates. It failed. Bring down power and gas rates. They failed. Why did they fail? Because they didn't go for privatization at all. They talked about pension reforms. They failed. They talked about right-sizing the government. They failed. They talked about devolution of the government to the provinces. They failed. They've talked about local government empowerment, local government. They failed. Maryam Nawaz Sharif took every power from the local government and brought it back to the Chief Minister's office. In Sindh, there is no local government to speak of. Other than Murtaza Wahab, who's a good guy, his tweets, there is no local government to be seen anywhere. Same with PTI and KP. Says there is no local government. We talked about either making new provinces or giving local government some authority. None of that is happening. Unless and until those things happen, and unless and until those powers are given to local authorities who are close to the people, nothing will happen. So your human development will not increase. But your economy could have increased even now if they had reduced the tax rates. And had they reduced PSDP, had they reduced some current expenditures, tax rates could have been brought down. But unimaginative people who would rather give 800 billion rupees to MNAs and MPAs in the 5 budgets, than give tax breaks to salaried people. That's what the government is.
So essentially, we fully agree here that a tax break could have been given to salaried individuals, to pretty much everyone out there, because as we know, it's one of the highest tax rates in the world right now at the margin. What could have been cut? Let's be more specific about it.
Let's just start this. The PSDP this year is going to be 800 billion, next year it's going to be 1,000 billion. There was no reason why to keep it more than 500 billion. So 500 billion could have been cut from PSDP. I think the civilian government budget last year was 838 billion. They ended up spending 860 billion. This year the budget is 971. They could have just kept it at 900. They increased salaries of government officers by 10%. They could have just kept it at 5%.
So my argument there is they're also part of the population, right? Whether that's
so you raise it by 5%, which is inflation, but not by 10%. But their other government expenses have also gone up. Why have they gone up? There's no reason. Your subsidies, your grants, we are still selling wheat in GB for 40 rupees a kg. We have 15 billion rupees of wheat subsidy. We are giving 92 billion subsidy to Pakistan Railways this year for their losses. Why do we have to give 100 billion to Pakistan Railways every year? Why can't we privatize it? Why can't we restructure it? We're not doing it.
Because half of that is roughly pensions. So then we come to your pension reform plan.
No, but 100 billion, 22 billion we give in PSDP to the railways to improve tracks, which should come out of operations, of course, but it doesn't. 70 billion is a direct cash subsidy, okay? Now it could be pensions, it could be salaries, depending on it could be fuel. But the fact of the matter is the railways is losing money. 92 billion this year.
And there is no incentive to improve.
109 billion last year, 92 billion this year. The government of Pakistan doesn't pay my company money to pay salaries. I figure out myself. Why should it pay Pakistan Railways money every year? Why should it? Every time a passenger flies PIA loses 19,500 rupees. This is 2021, it probably loses more. Why do we have to pay for it? So, I mean, the government has to stop these stupid expenses. Some beginning has to take. I'm not saying every problem will be solved, but I want to see one problem being solved. I want to see one step being taken for one problem being solved. You cannot name one thing this PDM government of Shahbaz Sharif has done since this election which has helped the people. Not one thing. You cannot show me one bill, one legislation, one SRO, one notification which has helped the Pakistani people in any way.
All right, so while talking about right sizing, I mean, it's easy to talk about it, but when you look at privatization, when you want to actually do right sizing, what do? What's the playbook there? Do you fire people? If you fire people, what do they do? How do their pensions work out? Is there a golden handshake? See, that's the thing. This is why I just feel a lot of privatization simply do not happen. It's more of a people problem than anything else.
No. All these, for Pakistan Railways has been closed. Pakistan Steel Mill has been closed for close to 10 years now.
But we're still
paying salaries.
Exactly.
But
yes.
I mean, at some point everybody would retire, right?
And then you will pay their pensions.
Then you'll pay the pensions, and then once they die, their wives.
So how do you solve this problem?
Well, I mean, you do pension reforms first of all, okay. But let's just forget for a pension for a minute. Let's just come to privatization.
Yeah.
PIA, you're privatizing. I mean, if last time, if they really wanted to privatize, they would have listened to the 3 or 4 parties that were very interested. The Omni Group, legitimate, large group in Pakistan, had something to do with some Swiss aviation company. You had Air Arabia and Fly Jinnah making a consortium. You had Lucky Cement, again, very, very large group in Pakistan, possibly the largest, with some Pegasus, the Turkish airline. 3 serious people in the beginning, and then I think Arif Habib was also there, part of the mix. Habibullah Khan was there, part of the mix. Some serious Pakistani people with serious money were there. And they said that, look, your liabilities are more than your assets.
Yeah.
The government didn't address it. Why? And the government, instead of addressing the legitimate problems, kept Blue World just to bid so that it doesn't look nobody bid. Okay? So there was no intention. They knew this was going to fail. Now this time, the people who brought this government in are directly, talking to this thing. And hopefully PIA will be privatized. But they've done no work on distribution companies of gas and electricity. I don't know why we have to run petrol pumps. I don't know why PSO has to be part of the government. I don't know why any of OGDC, PPL should be part of the government. They should all be privatized. And just privatize, I mean, just people will buy it just as is, and then they will deal with the employees themselves. We don't have to worry about that. These companies have enough assets, enough revenue potential that these companies that lose 800 billion will actually start making 3,000 billion. And then all problems will be solved. They will figure out their pensions themselves. We don't have to worry about this. We only have to worry about the pensions of the federal employees directly.
All right. So do you think people will be willing to buy state-owned enterprises with all their legacy issues and all the legacy employees?
Mia Mansha bought MCB. He today pays, I think, 5 times more taxes then MCB could make money when he bought it. Sheikh Mukhtar bought ABL. These are not children. They are very savvy businessmen. They saw value, they bought it. There will be people who will buy it.
All right, this makes sense. So, just on an ending note, I mean, with the initial idea of there needs to be a restructure of the NFC, that is critical. And with that, there needs to be more, let's say, responsibility on the provinces to increase taxes, to cover any of their deficits. How do you think, just one last thing, now NFC happened, but a provincial financial commission never happened. How do you make that happen?
Well, in Punjab it did happen, but not in the way that you would like to see. There's a very simple reason. All divisions should be given money directly by the Federation.
Okay. Why not the province? Because the province is not giving it?
They haven't done it in 15 years. At best.
So how do you, from a pure operational perspective, how do you ensure accountability that way? Let's say the Federation gives...
How do you ensure accountability now? Is there accountability in Balochistan? Is there accountability in Sindh? Is there accountability in any province? I can now, alhamdulillah, also name projects in Punjab which are full of corruption. We don't ensure. When the US federal government gives money to their states, these are conditional grants, and they say, well, this is the objective of the grant, this is the outcome that should be, and etc., etc. We just give money, by rights, which is fine. That's a different system. But then, the accountability is done through electorates, if fair elections are held. But we now know that in each province, the political party in power, People's Party especially in Sindh, KP, PTI and Noon in Punjab, they don't want to give delegate power to the localities. And that's why the outcomes for children and women are getting worse and worse, social and educational outcomes. So you say, why? We will have elected mayors of divisions and we'll give money directly to them. And so there is no need for a PFC. And the PFC is given money at the same formula that NFC gives.
Okay, so you basically, again, you come back to the population formula then?
There is a formula, right, already. So we don't have to,
reinvent the wheel here.
Reinvent the wheel. And we'll say, well, I think that 20 to 30% of the money should go to the provincial administration, and the 60 to 70% money should just go to divisions directly.
Yeah, this comes back to our earlier discussion.
This would improve your schools and education.
Yeah, this comes back to our earlier discussion where you said, school boards need to be at a division level rather than at a provincial level.
School board should actually be at a school level.
At a school level, yes.
School board should, first, I think that all poor children, the 50% lower, below 50% children below the median income of Pakistan should be given vouchers, education vouchers, or should be given the option of either sending their children to government schools or getting an education voucher for 80% of the money that the province spends on per child per month. So Sindh, for instance, it spends 5,000 rupees per month, let's say. So it gives a voucher for 4,000 rupees to the child for education and 1,000 rupees for the lunch, for school breakfast. So the child gets a breakfast in school. These are private schools that are registered with the government of Pakistan, approved by the government of Pakistan, and then the kid can go there. And if the parent decides, no, he doesn't want to send his child to a private school, he'd rather just send him to the government school, that's fine also. Then the government school runs. The budget of the government school goes to the school board, which is composed of parents and some local notables and others, and they run the school. And the teachers become employees of that school.
Employees of school rather than the provincial government.
And then you will see the attendance will improve, then you will see teaching will improve.
You'll have more accountability across the board.
And then you will see that people who actually teach know the subject. Right now I can bet you that if you give a science test, metric science test to metric teachers in Sindh, 30% or more will fail.
No, I think 70 or more will fail. Yeah. All right, thank you, Mr. Saab. Like always, it was a pleasure. And the discussions on NFC and PFC, where rarely anyone talks about that here, so it's always insightful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.